Got some feedback. Crazy feedback. Okay. Good afternoon. Thank you, everyone, for attending, and welcome to our board work session. We will do announcements quickly, and because I'm so super excited, I'm going to take a point of personal privilege and go first this evening. I am so excited that our president will be here at McGavock High School on Thursday. I'm barely containing myself in this chair right now. I am so excited for our district. I'm excited for the kids. If I'm this excited, you can only imagine what the students are feeling right about now. So this is going to be an awesome opportunity, and we are welcoming President Obama with open arms and a lot of excitement and confetti and fanfare, and it's just awesome, very awesome. Even more incredible is that we've had the First Lady and the President now in a 7-month span visiting our district. So what does that tell you about how great we are? Also, one other thing is I wanted to also announce Dr. Jay Steele is not with us tonight because he is representing our Director of Schools at the Country Music Association tonight, where we are going to be presented with a check for $1 million for the Keep the Music Playing. So I think that deserves a round of applause. So that is super exciting, and so I'm just about beside myself this evening, so I can't hardly stand it. All right, so we'll go ahead around the table. Ms. Froh, do you have any announcements?
I do. I wanted to recognize a teacher tonight. I got an email from a grandparent at Hume Fogg, and she wrote about a teacher named Laura Lewis. We had a very tragic accident right before Christmas where the child was killed in an accident. And this particular teacher apparently really took great strides to support her students. She supported them through the experience. She went to a family's home. She helped them through the funeral. She counseled them. She guided them. And as the grandparent said, what this teacher did is never going to be measured by a test score or a teacher's evaluation, but what she did was truly extraordinary. So I wanted to publicly thank Laura Lewis and commend her for her support of her students during that time.
Fantastic. Thank you. Mr. Hayes? Ms. Shepherd?
I just have a couple. I wanted to let our viewing audience know that I spent the morning this morning at McGavock High School touring with the 8th grade students from DuPont Hadley Middle School. I also had 4 special guests with me. I had 3 students from 2 different private schools and 1 student from an academic magnet. They were so excited to see all the different programs and all the different programs that they have at McGavock High School, that when they went to the career fair after everyone did their show and tell, all 4 students ran to all the different stations so they could sign up to be a part of the extracurricular activities at McGavock, and they are very excited to go there. We spent 3 hours together this morning, and I was in my element. I was pumped. And just to resonate Chairwoman Mays' comments, I'm really excited to have the President visit with us on Thursday. And more so that Robin Wall, Principal Wall, and his staff at McGavock High School get the recognition that they deserve. They have truly worked very hard these last 4.5 years to turn that school around. It is an amazing school. It's a shining example of what we have here in Metro Nashville Public Schools as far as high schools are concerned. And I don't know if you've seen any of the news interviewing Principal Wall. He's loath to take any credit for anything going on at that school, but he is an amazing principal. He is truly a team player, and I want to thank him, his faculty, and staff for everything that they've done to make McGavock High School the school that it is today. Thank you.
Fantastic. Ms. Kim?
Surprise, surprise, I actually do have something. One is, because of the director's evaluation, I've been dwelling a lot on the 3 big strategies in the strategic plan. So, transformational teaching, quality teaching, transformational leadership, equity, and excellence. And I was struck when I was at Pearl Cone the other day about how, whether they were explicitly trying to live into these or not, they were. It was an interesting community meeting where they were trying to match up the needs of the school community with the resources available. And it was very targeted, it was very structured, they were very clear and transparent about their challenges and the data that expresses those challenges. And they did a call out to the community, and there are all kinds of community members there who run different organizations to try and see if there could be a match. So I thought that was a great example of, equity excellence when we talk about direct resources and supports to the needs of learners. That was manifested there. And then to hear her talk after the meeting about her focus on quality teaching and transformational leadership was also inspiring. I mean, that woman seems like she's on a mission. This is Dr. Sonia Stewart. So it was just very encouraging. And then the second example, too, is I was at Nashville Classical, which is the school that's like 3 blocks from my house. And a guy named Charlie Friedman runs that school. And I want to give him a shout out as well. I went to a parent meeting and got a chance to see some of the teaching and learning going on throughout that school building. And it was just extraordinary to see both the parents and their enthusiasm for the engagement of their kids. And it was cute how exhausted, even my little girl, she's exhausted at the end of the day. She used to be so hyper when she came home from school, and now she's like, all her energy is going into learning. And it was just adorable to see that. And then the kids just so engaged, and the teachers just leading forward in a just inspirational way. So I thought that was a great manifestation, too, of, again, quality teaching, transformational leadership. So just a big shout out to both Dr. Sonia Stewart and Charlie Friedman for that.
Thank you. Ms. Spearing?
Yes. Let's see if I can get this up again. Yesterday, I attended a community meeting at Maplewood High School, and it was really, Dr. I can't think of his name. Thank you. Dr. Ron Woodard is an amazing leader, and he had all of the community people who support the schools and work with the academies there, and we had lunch, and then he asked a question. How can you help me with a particular population? And the population were black males that were kind of hardcore and difficult to switch, and to get them on a new trajectory. And the different members in the community that were present, and there were about 20 different organizations represented, they came up with a list of about 15 or 20 ways of engaging these young men. And the enthusiasm that resulted as a result of that was very exciting. And I commend not only Dr. Woodard, but also all of the community members that worked together at Maplewood to make that a wonderful school. Second announcement is that on February the 27th, MNEA will conduct a retirement seminar for their teachers that will be retiring soon. And that seminar will be held at the MNEA headquarters from 4:45 to 6:45, and they'll present information on the Tennessee Consolidated Retirement System and also the medical benefits they will receive as part of our insurance trust. It's for members only, and a light meal will be served. And we had a wonderful community meeting last week at Madison Middle, talking about the culture and the culture of the school, and we heard from parents as well as teachers. And a special thanks to Katie Coor, who answered so many of the questions that were posed by our parents and teachers. And Barry Potts was also there to respond to concerns from middle school parents. And Amy and I will plan another community meeting, hopefully in February. We're working with Dr. Register about that now. And our tentative location is East Literature Magnet, if that's okay. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Dr. Brennan? Thank you. All right. One other thing I wanted to say, what a fantastic job our Pearl Cone choir did at the Martin Luther King Day Convocation. Mm-hmm. It was absolutely amazing. These students walked up on this stage and they basically kind of shut it down. The great thing about being a board member is when you get to experience those kinds of events with our students, because I think a lot of people don't always get to see how talented some of our students are, and that was absolutely awesome. So I'm just full of love today, apparently. So thank you all for your announcements, and we will move into our discussion, and I will turn it over to you, Dr. Register.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. We have two presentations tonight, two items for discussion, and both of them, each of them is an update to presentations that have already been made, either in committee or to the meeting as a whole. And so I've asked people to give you, first with a pre-K expansion plan, an update. As you know, we made a pretty good presentation, pretty broad presentation. You had a lot of questions and answers at the last board meeting. We are scheduled for the first business session in February to vote on whether to go ahead with the pre-K expansion plan and the conversion of 2 elementary schools to pre-K centers. And what we want to do is give you an update about what's happened since the board meeting, what we've been doing. We'll try to make this a concise report and then save some time for questions and answers so that we can identify as many questions as you might have ahead of next board meeting, and if we can't answer them all, at least tell you where we are in the planning process and what we need to do to move forward. So I've got Lisa Wiltshire and Brenda Steele and Phyllis Phillips to present, and Chris Weber is here in case you have some questions about zoning and the zoning recommendations. So I'll turn it over to Lisa now.
Thank you, Dr. Register. Good evening. A progress update. Since we last presented the pre-K plan to you, we have been going full force. And we have several work groups that have formed and have been moving on several fronts. The first thing I wanted to just remind you of is this initiative is really a twofold process. The first is the first phase of this, which is the establishment of 2 model pre-K learning centers at Ross and Bordeaux. And that's really the focus for the February 11th board meeting. But in addition to that, we have a longer term and bigger strategic planning process to expand high-quality pre-K in Nashville. So we've been working on both fronts, but I did just want to point that out. Oh, excuse me, I was thinking that was on. This might be better. Because the strategic plan is in development right now. That we may be able to answer most of your questions, but there's a lot that we're in process working on. The first update I wanted to inform you about is we have 2 community meetings set up now. And this is providing a means for the community, parents, teachers, and others in the communities to hear about the plan, to offer their input, concerns, questions, and comments. And the first meeting will be at Ross Elementary School on February 3rd. That's a Monday night at 5 o'clock. And then the second meeting is going to be at Bordeaux on Tuesday, February 4th at 5:30. So we have that advertised as well, but we are encouraging community members to come out and hear about the plan then. In terms of program design, which has been one of our primary areas of focus, we have been very busy. That is a collective we, benchmarking best practices. We have been partnering with the Peabody Research Institute and some faculty members there to make sure that the design that we're creating is evidence-based and based in research, national research. We have organized a program development committee. The core committee is comprised of several teachers and teacher leaders. You saw some of them at the last board meeting and heard from one of them. And we also have district leaders as well as partners as a part of the program work group. And they have been meeting, had several meetings so far, but are going to be meeting as a group this next week. And we have been collaborating with community partners, with Head Start, with United Way and others, and we are now extending our outreach to many more pre-K community partners to make sure that we are working together and collaborating, because we really see, especially the longer-term strategic planning, really needs to be a coalition if we're going to truly expand universal pre-K. We have had a couple of funding meetings. We are looking at the budget. The funding group has met twice to discuss the model program needs, current resources, and then how we'll go about getting some future funding. And they are in process of creating a model right now for us. And we have a group that's been heading up by Chris Weber and Brenda Steele looking at the application process for these centers. And you're going to be hearing a little bit more about that in the presentation. But now I think what we'd like to do is to give you a little bit more detail about these model pre-K centers. And with that, I'll introduce Brenda Steele.
Thank you, and good afternoon, good evening, rather. In our model pre-K centers, we want to ensure that we offer a diverse and inclusive program. Also providing optimal early childhood learning environments, which includes that safe, secure, nurturing, social emotional learning, which is embedded, and that is indeed important. When we talk about print rich, it's important that our students, that it is embedded within the environment. It's centered based, which includes activities designed to address the academic, the social, and emotional learning of our students, and the engaging materials where they learn through doing. As we look at our faculty and staff, we have been working with human capital because we want to ensure that we have early childhood expertise in that our staff understands child development for our 4-year-olds. The importance of the early language, the vocabulary, and the emergent literacy piece that's important, as well as foundational math skills. We are in the process of even looking at our curriculum, maybe different from what we have today. We have Doors to Discovery and Growing with Math, as well as with our partnership with United Way, but we want to align our early development standards with our curriculum. So therefore, if you look on our website and also Empowering Schools Wiki, you will see our early development standards. As far as enrichment, we want to include the art, the music, and movement so that students will be involved with that, as well as providing those family services, which are so important in parent engagement and the education for them. So we want to ensure that. In our plan, we're looking at, diversity. We want to continue to work with our student assignment with Chris and Janae, because we feel that our growth plan is based on increasing the number of eligible children served and ensuring diversity in pre-K centers in the classrooms. We want a targeted recruitment, and we've been working on what that would look like. No fee to attend, full-day programming, that's 8 to 3, providing after-school activities as well, and strategic locations, which we've talked about with Ross and Bordeaux.
Okay, we also wanted to give you a little bit more color in terms of what we're looking at in funding. And I know you're going to talk extensively and hear a little bit more about the capital costs. There are some capital costs at Ross and Bordeaux together totaling just a little over $1 million. That would be a part of the renovating of Bordeaux, and some outfitting that needs to be done at Ross. In addition to that, if we just contain the current classrooms, so these would be the pre-K classrooms at Ross and Bordeaux, and relocate the other classrooms to those sites. When we were talking at the last board meeting and we mentioned budget neutral, there's really minimal associated costs with just establishing these pre-K centers at the current level of service. When we start looking at program expansion and adding on additional classrooms, we have an approximate startup cost of $150,000 per classroom. And if, that would be up to a total of $1.9 million if we were going to add an additional 260 seats. which would be adding 13 classrooms to Ross and Bordeaux. And that's kind of the maximum side of our initial growth plan in terms of the phase one. The recurring costs are going to be a bit less than the startup costs in terms of operations. And in addition to that, when we talk about establishing model centers, we are looking closely at those dependencies so we can really flesh out the sources and uses of funds. So, there would be some costs associated with things such as the development of curriculum and some enrichment activities. If we are going to provide gifted services or special needs services, there are some costs, mainly staffing, associated with that. Professional development, marketing, recruitment, family services. But you should know that we are really looking at closely at maximizing some synergies, maybe relocating costs, really investigating and examining what kind of infrastructure we can use now rather than just adding costs. And we have some partnerships going on where we're looking at some grants for the before and after care programming at these sites. So we don't have associated numbers right now because that very much is in development, and it depends on our growth plans and our strategy and what we're planning to kind of map out for these programs. Then the next slide you've seen before. There's no change here. I just wanted to reiterate to you that we have several work groups looking at this from a high level down to the kind of nitty-gritty detail. Our teams haven't changed, but they have further developed and started meeting. And they have actually grown, so we're expanding some of our partnerships to make sure we're being very thorough and intentional in all of our decision making. And you received the specific zoning analysis at the last board meeting for Ross and Bordeaux. We have some more copies of that if you'd like to look at that again, and we at this time would welcome and invite your questions.
Any questions from board members? Ms. Spearing?
First of all, I want to commend Dr. Register and MNPS for scheduling the community meetings where parents have an opportunity to voice their concerns at the two schools. And forgive me if this is a question that's already been answered, thank you. But how, we'll have the two centers, Bordeaux and Ross, and how many other locations will house pre-K? Every elementary school, will it also have pre-K?
I can answer that.
Okay.
We currently have, we're currently in 59 school sites and 5 community centers. And so with the 2 additional hubs, we'll continue to keep the sites other than the ones that we talked about moving into Ross and Bordeaux, but we'll keep the others at their existing sites.
So how many will that be? Still be 50 some odd locations?
59.
59.
Minus the Glenn, Chadwell, Cumberland, and
So it'll still be throughout the city. Okay, great. And do the teachers need a special certification for pre-K?
We have asked that they have a pre-K certification, and as a matter of fact, Rob Hancock has been working to look to see exactly those teachers who are already on staff that have it. But we want to ensure that those that are on staff have that expertise, talents, because we're saying we want these to be model programs. So there will be other individuals that will probably apply to come into the centers.
So we don't have a sense yet about how many, if we'll have the capacity to fully staff these new classrooms.
I think we'll have the capacity because we've already started looking into it. I've talked to Shireen Douglas, with HC, and she's working on that as we speak. We're saying we need approximately 13 teachers and 13 assistants.
Okay.
Additional.
Okay.
For those two model centers.
Right.
Okay.
So that's a pretty modest expansion. But so we really wanted to step it for you or phase it for you so that at the basic level we're basically talking about relocating and starting 2 hub centers with the same number of classes and the same number of students, so that it can be, for the most part, budget neutral. That's not really where we want to go. We at least would like to flesh out those 2 model centers so that they're serving 200, how many more children? 260 more children. We also, as we mentioned earlier, want to look at the possibility of a 3rd site, an additional site in South Nashville. And we're in negotiations with some partners that we're not at liberty to share publicly now, but we'll be able to just in the next few weeks about a very likely 3rd site for a 3rd hub. And I guess the other thing I would say is that when you're asking about numbers of programs, we really have 2 elementary schools that would, at the first level, pass their pre-Ks into the, completely close down their pre-K programs and serve them in the hubs. That'd be at Glenn and Cumberland. The other schools, Caldwell would, we don't know if there are several programs there in a community-based program, and we might leave one of the programs there and relocate to serve children who are walking. We're not quite sure of that, but then beyond that, we really want to start adding to capacity. And I would love to see us go to 500 additional seats this year, but we want to make sure that we do it the right way. Correct. And so there are 2 balances here. Sorry for answering this,
That's
but
okay.
so there are really 2 balances. One is to increase numbers, increase capacity, but the other is to really deal with quality. And I think I'm as excited about the program committee as anything, and I'm going to give it back to Brenda Steele now to talk about that.
No, basically, I think I'm more excited about the opportunities for our students in Metro. I think if we provide them the quality programs, then I've been reading a whole lot about what it is we need to do, and Phyllis has heard me say this before. If we can get it right at the beginning and then continue throughout, our students will be prepared, and I really believe that. These sites, I do want them to be model, but not just these sites. I want the other classes as well to be. So this is the year for pre-K, and that's what we're looking to do.
And I can see that this will be a major ability. This will provide a major ability for us to extend our staff development and professional development to our teachers, and they can come in and see others teach. Right. I think that's wonderful. And with the idea that we have 72% poverty in this city, in this school district, this is the right move, and I'm very excited about it. Thank you.
Any other comments? Ms. Shepard, and then we'll go down to Ms. Froak. And Mr. Hayes, I'm sorry.
Okay, first, yay. I'm really still very excited about this. I have several questions. Have you had any feedback yet with in regard to from parents or perhaps the pre-K teachers or anything as to what their feeling is about this?
Prior to our last board meeting, we did meet with all the schools, and I sat down with the pre-K teachers. I did not have any negative response because they are really interested in pre-K growing. I think the number one thing that was so important to them is that they are looking at the consistency, what we're trying to do, improve the program. So I did not have any negative comments from them.
I think that maybe Lisa touched on this, the targeted recruitment. Is that going to be specific to the neighborhoods surrounding the 2 schools, or is that going to be district-wide, or what is that going to look like?
We want it to be district-wide to get the diverse population that we want. It just can't be in the environment and what we were talking about in the Ross community or, say, the Bordeaux. So what we're hoping is we're working with Chris's department to look at how we can provide an application process so that parents can apply to go to those sites.
And when you talk about full-day programming, you said from 8 to 3?
We're saying 8 to 3, and we're working with Jeannie Poople-Walker's department with student services because there are some grants opportunities available already that we can really work with.
So their school day will be from 8 to 3?
Their school day.
And
we're
then
gonna-
they'll have perhaps the opportunity to have after-school
Exactly,
programs?
exactly.
Okay, so you talked about marketing and recruitment. That goes along with the application process then?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Mr. Hayes?
Sure. Thank you. I want to follow up a little bit more on Ms. Spearing's question around, and just maybe you can help me understand this, the budget timeline. We have spent a lot of time talking this fall, last fall, and through the winter about a perceived budget shortfall of $23+ million. So this grows it to $25+ million if Mr. Pinkston's numbers are accurate. And I think I understand this, that if we are not expanding the program and we are just shifting, closing Ross, closing Bordeaux, and, well, closing is the wrong word, moving students out of Ross and Bordeaux in the K through 4 to create the pre-K center without a program expansion, that's budget, relatively close to budget neutral. And so we won't necessarily know if we have the additional approximately $2 million until we've worked our way through the operating budget process. So really sometime in June, we know that we can take this from the same number of classrooms we have today to 600 classroom, or ability to serve an extra, was it 12 classrooms in each, 13 in each building?
No, 13 all.
13 total. So we'll know that in the summer, and we'd begin staffing for it in the summer. How do we just, can you help me understand better the timeline? Because let's just say we do have a funding gap, and we don't get all the funds that we'd like to have from Metro Council when we make our budget request. Can you walk us through the next 5 months?
It's, and having a final, well, actually, Metro Council doesn't really finally have to approve its budget till July 1st, and I'll anticipate your anxiety there that that's mighty late in the process. But it's a matter of priority, and months before that, or certainly weeks before that, you'll get my recommendation on a budget, you'll deliberate, you'll set your priorities in a budget, and I dare say that if $2 million is your top priority, that we will adjust our budget so that we find that $2 million. Because it's a very small percentage of our overall budget.
Right.
So it is a priority process. I will very aggressively recommend this program. This is the best return on investment we can make, in my opinion, in a district like this. So what I wanted to present to you is a way to step into growth and improvement of quality, so that there's not a great fear of, we just can't afford to do this. We can make the change. We can establish the 2 centers, and we can grow this program. And we can grow this program by little steps or bigger steps, depending on what's available and how aggressive we want to be with moving our budget. And I
wholeheartedly support it. And I'm thinking about if we get into a scenario 4 months from now where we're looking at a $30 million shortfall or a $40 million shortfall for whatever reason. To the extent we've got an option that's budget neutral or very close to it, from the capital improvement budget standpoint, says,
Right.
yeah, let's go ahead and spend the $1 million to create
Yeah.
the center and then look for a dedicated or alternate funding source. I mean, just having watched what's happened in Memphis and thinking back about how we tried to raise sales taxes by a quarter point 5 years ago and how that didn't really go so well in Davidson County. And ultimately, I agree. I see I personally see a tremendous value in pre-K and hope we can find a way to grow it aggressively, but have a lot of concerns about funding and timeline, particularly in this cycle.
So we've watched with interest developments in Memphis, and let me say at this point in time, I do not anticipate a tax increase. So let's just start by saying that's not going to happen. I think there was a pretty good article in the paper today. Rich Riebling was quoted as saying that our revenue is doing very well. And so I'll go back to what I said earlier. Sometime in the spring, it's going to become a matter of priority for us and for you and for Metro Council when it comes to our budget. And at this point in time, I don't see a higher priority.
Along those lines of higher priority, I assume you think if you personally had $2 million to invest, this is the best return on investment you could give us to ultimately to move that bar forward for the Education 2018.
The last research I saw on that is it's a return on investment of $7 to $8 per each dollar invested.
That's fine.
And I believe, and I think that speaks to the value of the investment, but I also think it speaks to giving our children the start that they need to start out closing that gap. And the other statistic that weighs on me is the fact that this year we have 800 September babies who will not have an opportunity to start to school because of the change in the entrance requirement for school. And if our numbers are true, then 72% of those children of that 800 may just stay at home next year. And I think it's a moral imperative to me to deal with that. We've got to make a change.
I support it, so I'm excited about the prospect.
I know.
I see it in kids.
I'm glad you didn't take a vote last time because we'll get to talk about it again, frankly.
Ms. Brogue?
Well, first I want to say that my own son had participated in our existing pre-K program, and we really had a phenomenal experience. They've got as all of these classrooms are going to be, we had the blended model, and so we had half special needs and half peer models, and the children all learned from each other. It was just a really fantastic experience, and we loved the teacher. Our teacher was Allison Riley, who's phenomenal. So anyway, so I'm really excited that all children are going to have the same opportunities that my son was offered. My question is, what do the startup and recurring costs include? Is that including staffing, I assume?
That includes the teacher, the assistant, and any other materials that may be needed.
Okay.
Yes.
So I think 20 students per classroom and 2 adults.
And I have a question. Ms. Fargo, you finished with your question?
Yes.
Okay. I have a question regarding the wait list. I think the last time, Phyllis, you said there were like right around 1,000 students on the wait list. Okay, so my question is, how do we, once these programs open, are we going to give preference to those who've been on the wait list first, or are we going to open it up to some sort of lottery pick?
May I start an answer on that, and then I would like for you to pass that mic to Chris. And so each year you have a new wait list because it's 4-year programs. So they're moving on to kindergarten. Those that are on the wait list last year hopefully will be moving into kindergarten this year. But we've been very particular to look at how we market, how we recruit, how we develop a wait list and to be responsive to two things. One is to serve low-income children, but the other is to ensure diversity in each one of these classrooms. And those aren't exclusive. You can do both, but you have to have a very, very sophisticated selection process. And Chris has been working with Dr. Stevens, Dr. Lynn Stevens, our diversity expert, who is helping us implement our diversity plan. He's actually coming in this week to help to continue to look at precisely how you select. And I'll ask Chris to just talk a little bit more about some of the discussions that you've had, and please understand that this is a work in progress, that we haven't made final decisions about this, but I'm very encouraged by the work that's being done. Chris?
Well, Dr. Register, I think you answered the question correctly in that the wait list that Phyllis had mentioned is essentially for the current year, so that would not be relevant for upcoming pre-K students for the next year. So those wait lists would be the forming in April and May as the application process gets underway for the upcoming next school year. I'm not sure what else to contribute to that, but I'd be glad to answer any other questions.
The reason I ask that is because, and this sounds really odd, but there are parents that have children that will be coming into our district that are planning ahead by 2-3 years. I had a conversation with a parent who, for 2 hours, I had a conversation with her about transitioning to 5th grade, only to find out that her child was currently in 1st grade. So the reason I asked that question is because I wanted to get a sense of whether or not the 1,000 students that were on that list were all incoming pre-K or kindergarten students, or if that list rolled over every year, or if there were some that have been just placing it out there as a placeholder.
Phyllis can answer that, but I'm pretty certain it was the pre-kindergarten list for this actual school year.
And so does that list roll over every year?
No, it doesn't. Each year we do the application process in April, and so we create a new waiting list based upon the applications that we receive for the current school year.
Okay. Thank you. Ms. Shepherd?
One more question. With this model, with these two schools, do you have a feeling that this would reduce the number of students on the wait list so that it's not as high every year? Is that one of the goals?
That's a tough question for me to answer because we would like to provide more services to everybody, which would in fact reduce the size of the wait list. However, at these schools, depending on the marketing and the demand and everything, the wait list might vary at these schools. So whether or not the impact on the 1,000, if we increase capacity, then theoretically the wait list would be less.
So our goal is to serve everyone who wants or needs a program. And so I think the appropriate way to look at that is how quickly can we grow quality program? And by grow, I mean increase the number of students served. And I think really the way to look at it is how many students can we add next year? What do the numbers look like? I want to mention one other thing that I think is really important, and that's the partnership. And I'll mention this every time we talk about it publicly because children are served in other means besides just MNPS and 4-year-old programs. And our goal is to partner with all those other programs. You know, the ultimate goal is to serve all children who need the service. And so we want to develop that partnership with Head Start much closer than it is now. And we also want to look at quality private providers. And quality is a very important word there. And I think one of the challenges that we see in 4-year-old programming is quality across the board. And I hope that we can really lead an effort to raise quality in public schools, and work with Head Start to do it there, work with our private providers to do it there, so that all of our 4-year-olds are getting a very high-quality program.
I have a question.
Dr. Brennan, and then Ms. Spearing.
In terms of the cutoff dates for 4-year-olds, are they the same cutoff dates that are used for the kindergartners? Or since this is not mandated, are they different?
August 15th is the cutoff date for both pre-K and kindergarten.
Any other questions, Dr. Brown?
No.
Okay. Ms.
Thank you.
Berry?
Dr. Register, you mentioned that you had talked to some private providers and that there was some concern about what it would do to their business. What was the response and how did that end?
Well, we don't want private providers of quality to think that we're trying to shut them down or to take their students. I think there are more children than we can all handle right now in four-year-old programs, and I think it's, I don't want people to assume that we're really trying to be the big guy on the block and close other programs down. I think we need to grow programs. And so it's not I think the competitive part of it is we want quality programs everywhere. And so that I want to establish a standard of high-quality programs, and I want it to be our models. I want it to start with our models, but I want it to spread across Davidson County. We know that there are approximately 8,000 kindergarten children now. We serve 2,500 pre-Ks. The numbers are about the same from year to year. Head Start serves about 1,500. There is a huge gap in the number of children that are not served. And so we want to increase capacity county-wide.
Right. One other question. Yes, thank you. Are there common core standards for pre-K?
We don't have common core standards, but we do have early learning development standards that are aligned to Common Core.
Would you say that our pre-Ks that are in existence now, would you say they're at the level that we want them, or we're beefing those up as well?
And we are beefing those up as well.
I was going to say, I think we are beefing them up as well. We've had teachers to work with Dave Moore and Nathan Lang as far as looking at the standards and deconstructing them so that they will have a better knowledge of what those standards are. So I think we're doing both. We're trying to not only beef up the standards in the classes we already have, but we want to make sure we have a quality program in the centers.
Thank you.
Any additional questions? Ms. Kim?
Thank you. Do we have a clear definition codified on paper of what K readiness looks like?
I believe I wrote that down, that we need to make sure we have that. As a matter of fact, we had that discussion. We have the characteristics written down, but I think what you're asking is a little bit different. So I think we'll have that the next time we come to our meeting. Yeah.
Okay. No other questions on pre-K? Fantastic.
Thank you very much. You can expect a recommendation from me at the next board meeting.
Thank you all very much. We're all excited.
Madam Chair and members of the board, our next topic, Mr. Hayes. Mr. Hayes, you need to introduce this one. This is capital. I'm sorry.
Sure. Mr. Murdoch and Mr. Henson, I believe, in assist as well.
Chris, you're going to stay with us on this one, aren't you?
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
We've had the opportunity to have many committee meetings, and unfortunately throughout the winter, with the holidays and trying to meet in December and January, they've been sparsely attended. At our last Capital Improvement Budget Committee meeting, we called for a vote to approve the budget, and there were still some lingering questions from various board members. So we hope to take this evening first to spend a little bit more time to make sure that folks have had questions answered that were out there in the last committee meeting, partially because we need to approve our 6-year priority list. So this is not a spending plan. This is our priority list that is required by statute to go to the planning department by the end of January, revised on an annual basis. So the list that's before you is the administration's recommended 6-year priority plan that also begins to try to outline the cost of the capital improvements, and I think there's probably a fairly strong amount of detail in the year one estimates, and as we move out to year 5 and 6, it's hard to judge what escalations might look like. I know as we've moved through this process, even in the last 4 months, Mr. Murdoch and others have worked to really revise our construction cost estimates based on current market conditions, changes imposed upon us by city and state and federal government, particularly around Clean Water Act and stormwater and things that we're dealing with that we didn't have to deal with historically. And then I guess since our first presentation of this budget to today, there have been some additions and changes like the Ross and Bordeaux and another couple of small adjustments.
That's correct. The changes from the last time you looked at this document are the ones that are highlighted. One on page 1, which is the development of a model pre-K in South Nashville that Dr. Register mentioned. And that project and site are being explored. And then on page 4, there's an addition of an auditorium lighting upgrade for all of our auditoriums. Most of our auditoriums, the lighting within them are not energy efficient, and they're not long life lamps. And in many cases, in fact all cases, the control panels are failing. And so we are lacking having the ability to control house lighting and stage lighting in our auditoriums. So these 3 items would upgrade those for all high schools, middle schools, elementary schools, and specials. So the 36 auditoriums that we have within the district. Those are the only changes from the last time that we have reviewed this.
Any questions from board members? Ms. Spear?
Just a question about the lights. Are these lighting upgrades, I've heard of lights that cost more on the front end, but over time, they save money. Are those the type of lighting apparatus that we're using?
It is. It involves both the fixture and the actual lamp or the bulb within the fixture. And the older lamps use a lot more energy for the amount of light that they put out. And so we have currently going on within classrooms and other parts of all of our schools a lighting upgrade package that's upgrading that lighting, and it results in 2 benefits. One, the quality of the lighting is just better. More light, a wider light, and more conducive to learning. And then the second is it's a much less energy use, so we're saving a lot of energy through these new fixtures. When we move into the auditorium, we're accomplishing both of those as well. We're getting new fixtures, new technology using either LED or compact fluorescent lamps, but we're also upgrading the computer control panels that allow you to bring up lights, dim lights, and be able to have productions. And those are the more costly components within the auditoriums, and the ones that are failing, and in many cases have failed totally, so they're not usable.
What percentage of our schools at this time have this upgraded lighting?
We're in the process of completing it now, where it will be probably in the 90%. We have 22 last of the projects that we're doing that are underway now. I think about 6 of those 22 have been completed, and the remaining ones will be completed in the next few weeks. So that would be by far the majority of our schools that we've changed the lighting out.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions?
Yes, right above that is the pre-K playground. So at Ross and Bordeaux, are those pre-K playgrounds already in place?
There are playgrounds there, but we'll be adding capacity because we'll have more pre-K classes. But that budget item that you're referencing also includes pre-K playgrounds at other schools as well.
I see.
We do have some pre-K schools with pre-K classes that do not have a pre-K playground.
Okay, so this item is separate from the renovations that you already have in budget for Bordeaux.
That is correct.
Ms. Spear? Oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Rowe? And then we'll come back to you, Ms. Beer. Go ahead.
Okay, I just had a really minor question. The stage curtains, I just happened to notice. Are those, I've just had a few schools ask me or express a need for stage curtains, and East Literature was one of them. How are those going to be distributed? I mean, that's really detailed.
I don't know exactly. That is submitted by our maintenance department, and
Is that just a regular point of maintenance for
it is.
schools?
They have evaluated all schools and know which ones are at the point that need to be replaced.
Okay.
There is a list, though. We can get that to you.
I was just curious.
Chris, would you just send them out there?
Okay.
Just let them know what the priority list is.
Thank you.
I think the hard part, though, when we get into minutia around lighting or curtains, is it's difficult to balance our needs for classrooms and growth and kids out of portables. And if you recall, last year it was, we need help with a track at a certain school. And it's really difficult to balance so many of the needs that we have as a district. We've got a really healthy number in year one and over 6 years. And so to the extent we're saying, yeah, this is our priority, I think it's also important as we talk to our constituents to be realistic and say, look, if we look at the capital constraints of the city, we're likely not going to see all of year one funded. And so it's hey, it's great to talk about curtains for an auditorium. But at the same time, we've got huge growth problems in the southeast part of the county. We've got kids in portables that we struggle to get warm on these cold days. We've got fleet problems with our buses, and not that it's a disaster, but it's as we deliberate, as this comes back to us 4 months from now, right, as we're really talking about our funding priorities, it's hard to balance curtains versus classrooms. And I'd love to have new curtains and new lights and lots of things, but my priorities personally would lie with how do we get enough seats to serve all the kids in a really safe and warm and comfortable environment.
Thank you. My question is about bathrooms in pre-Ks. And it looks like we've got at Bordeaux converting, there's a pot of money for converting something to pre-K, for pre-K. Does that include the bathrooms? How are we with the bathrooms at the two locations? I suspect that's a state law, isn't it, that bathrooms that don't have to be in the room?
Well, there are some requirements that does not, the state law doesn't require one in every classroom, but Ken, you want to speak to what our thinking is right now on that?
I do, although the state law doesn't require a bathroom in each classroom. In our program for these two schools, we're including that. So we'll be adding 10 bathrooms into classrooms at Bordeaux, an additional 7 at Ross. We have 5 now. And the other part of the conversion at Bordeaux is demolition of part of the buildings, the part near the street that's older and needs to be replaced, and just repair of the site, and then the addition of the toilets in these classrooms.
Great, thank you.
I have a question, Ken, or whoever can answer this, regarding the emergency maintenance and the entry vestibules. I know we've worked on getting a lot of those entry vestibules updated or created. Where are we on getting those done? Because I'm noticing that we have it budgeted for the next 6 years. How many schools have been retrofitted or upgraded with those emergency vestibules, and how many more do we have to go?
I'll have to get that list to you. We have, I think, the last count I remember looking at, we had about 20 more elementary schools, which has been our priority. We have approximately 4 underway right now in some phase of either design or permitting or construction. Mm-hmm. And so our goal is to just continue working through 5 or 6 or a year and wrap them up. We've also started adding them in some of our middle schools and high schools, which was not our first priority, but as we look at security issues and just other traffic flow, we're adding them in those as well.
I know a lot of the high schools, well, I shouldn't say a lot, there are several that I am aware of that already have the emergency, the doors or they have the emergency cameras or whatever you call them on the doors. So I was just kind of curious because I know elementary definitely would be one of my first concerns as well. So thank you. Any other questions? Mr. Hayes?
I'll defer.
Ms. Kim? Oh, okay. I should know this, but on the combined condition score, is there an available list that illustrates what's behind? So like 2 scratches down on the combined condition score?
There is. The combined score is made up of 3 components. One is just the condition of the building itself. The second is the condition of the site and the parking. And then the third component is the suitability of the building for the instructional programs that are taking place in it. And so those 3 components make up that combined score.
Equally? Third, or is it
No,
weighted
it's
differently?
60% for the building condition, 30% for the suitability, and 10% for the site.
Got it, thank you. Okay, so then current capacity utilization is just a non-factor in the prioritization?
It's not a factor in that condition score except as it addresses suitability. There would be some component of capacity that would be reflected in how suitable the building's meeting the needs.
Got it, okay. And just to, I don't know, I'd be interested, Mr. Hayes, and how you think about this too, or Mr. Murdoch, it just wasn't, I mean, right, it's like so many priorities to your point earlier, and lots of concerns, but it wasn't totally intuitive to me in places where we're bursting at the seams, that they would be 3 years out versus a school that's at 50% capacity. Anyway, so that's why I asked the question. I was wondering how that actually literally got factored in.
Mr. Hayes?
I was going to talk just ever so briefly about just an idea that Mr. Pinkston's advocated for that hasn't shown up in this budget, but talks about rapid expansion of capacity faster. And it again doesn't show up on this budget, but I think it's worth our time to think about and talk about. Will's talked about the notion, and I've echoed the same idea. And spoke with Ken about it, Dr. Register about it, but the notion of a charter school incentive fund to look at how, we've got a lot of vacant property to the south where in Cheryl's district and Mr. Pinkston's district, we've got rapid growth and a kind of a theme that I've thought about is how do we strategically plan to do more with less, right? We've got north of $1 billion capital budget backlog. We have to be more strategic in thinking about our high schools, which are really expensive. I'm delighted with what we've started with MLK, with a master planning exercise to look at how do we grow capacity there and meet our needs. I think we have certainly the same opportunity to look at other high schools that we know are going to be really expensive, and are there strategic alternatives to look at those bigger, more expensive packages. At the same time, to the extent we could grow faster in the southern part of the county with attracting a high-quality charter operator to move faster into a building that we couldn't necessarily could we buy a building and lease it to an operator and recruit a best-in-class operator to come in and build program capacity faster for significantly less than we could do it and maintain very, very tight control over the operator because it's our facility, or because we're giving them what in my world is called a tenant improvement allowance, right? Could we give them some amount of money, either as a loan or as part of a lease rate if it's an owned facility, or a loan, which other districts do. Will's talked about a $2 million fund. I don't have necessarily an idea, but it would be a way, particularly as we go into this cycle in the next couple of days, I guess we're kind of in it now, to look at how do we get more elementary or middle capacity in your neighborhood and Mr. Pinkston's neighborhood where we've got this rapid growth. And so I would certainly encourage you, first, I wish Mr. Coverstone was here. He had a conflict this evening. Dr. Register may have some thoughts to share around that idea. And between now and Thursday, when we get to vote on this, I would hope that you could follow up with Mr. Pinkston to hear his thoughts, or Mr. Murdoch and maybe Dr. Escher have some ideas around the notion of a charter incentive fund, which again, didn't end up here, but it may be a way to address your concern to grow quickly in the southern part of the county, get kids out of portables, which I think we all want to see, for a number that's at a fraction of the cost that we could do it ourselves.
I think we have different possibilities there. When we look at the real challenge that we have in South Nashville, the whole Antioch area, Nolensville Pike, Murfreesboro Road area, it concerns me that I don't think one single strategy is going to solve our problem there. The growth is so rapid that we're growing faster than we can build schools. And so the idea of the incentive fund, plugging that into the budget, I think makes sense based on the policy that you approved to recruit charters to relieve overcrowding. And the thing I would say to that is to remember that if you put it in year one, we still have a decision to make later in the spring when we know how much money we have about prioritizing that. 2 months down the road, we may have a better idea about potential partnerships, charter partnerships, and it may be prudent to plug that in.
And we may not have an applicant that will take it, but it's a nice, as we're going to the market today, it is a nice carrot to dangle.
Yeah.
And we might not have an applicant that would even meet our expectations or criteria, but and they might come in at, hey, you know what, $200,000 gets us there.
So we have a line item on here, Overton Cluster Elementary School in the Tusculum area, and I think we need to be creative in thinking about, that's a $14.5 million line item there. So purchase of non-traditional school property and building out or remodeling or doing different things in different ways, either schools for us, a pre-K center, charter incentive fund. There are many uses that you could see that might allow us to reduce that amount but still have a quick impact. And I see that Tusculum, that Overton Cluster Elementary School is one potential for that, and perhaps a $2 million addition for a charter incentive fund would be another.
Anybody, any other board members have any thoughts around that notion? Or if you don't, think about it. Follow up. I would certainly follow up with Mr. Coverstone. He has some detailed thoughts. I know Mr. Pinkston, he sent me a lengthy email around, I wouldn't say a lengthy email, a couple, actually 3 sentences, and then a quick conversation around it, around that idea.
Well, I'd like to, before we attempt to entertain anything, I'd like to see something that's more than a notion. I think it speaks to serve a lot of children. It speaks to relieve some capacity, especially we're at the rafters in southeast Davidson County. So if there is a possibility to relieve some of that capacity, some of the capacity issues that we have, then it's definitely worth putting on the table. But I'd like to see some concrete ideas rather than just some up-in-the-air ideas, some up-in-the-air thoughts about it. And perhaps we can entertain that idea. Again, I'll go back to, because it seems that every time I drive home, we've grown by at least another couple of hundred people. And so we're quickly running out of room to house our students for educational purposes. So I'd love to see the idea. I'd love to get a better idea of where we would go, not just in the short term, but in the long term. How's that going to be effective in year 1, 2, and 12? So I'd like to see how we continue to move and grow with the plan.
Mr. Coverstone had some pretty baked, I'd say fully baked, but he had actually a pretty lengthy PowerPoint presentation. But in our last committee meeting, we didn't get there. We didn't have time to present it and really talk about it. which is why we have a little bit of time on the agenda this evening, and then I'm nervous about, with the president's visit Thursday, and we're already pushing back, and just everybody's time constraints, the ability to really flush it out. But to the extent it's, again, this is a planning department document, we definitely have some time to flush it out before we're funded. And so in the coming days and weeks, I hope everybody has the opportunity to think about it and follow up with Dr. Register and Mr. Coverstone.
Yeah, Chris, speak to our legal requirements on completing this, please, and the concept of a placeholder and further discussion as we go on.
Sure. This is, as Mr. Hayes indicated, more of a planning document, required 6-year capital improvement budget that's required to be submitted to the Metro Planning Department by the end of January. And it will be included in the Metro Planning Department's documentation of all Metro departments and agencies regarding their 6-year capital improvement budget request. Eventually, the mayor will recommend and the Metro Council will ultimately approve a capital funding request. And that capital funding request will be based upon the 6-year capital improvement budget that's been submitted by every department within Metro, obviously concentrating on the year one priorities, because year one would be the top priority. And so that doesn't necessarily mean just because the school board has approved a 6-year capital improvement budget that we'll get capital funding. We obviously
At all.
hope that we do, but there have been years when we haven't received capital funding. And so we're anticipating capital funding, maybe not to the extent that we've got it expressed here, but this is more of a planning document so that we can express our needs to the Metro Planning Department, and then when Metro begins to discuss the funding aspect of capital, then there is a document by which that they use to make recommendations, and that recommendation initially comes from the mayor, and then through discussions with us, and then ultimately the Metro Council will approve that capital funding request.
Dr. Brennan?
Yes, I just have a question that's concerning the Nashville School of the Arts. Can you update me on, or us, on where we stand with the contract with the state? Because at one time, we were going to lose the property or not be able to utilize it, or can you update us?
I'll begin the discussion and then turn it over to Ken for some additional detail. My understanding is that that Metro does now own the property. And we have been in some brief discussions with Metro General Services regarding the entire property, which pieces will belong to the school district, which pieces will belong to Metro government, and then there's another piece that will belong to STEM Prep Charter School. And so the original map showed what we would have, and it didn't necessarily correspond to our needs. We anticipate expanding Nashville School of the Arts, or requesting to expand Nashville School of the Arts to increase its enrollment, but the way that the lines were drawn didn't give us the land that we need to do that. And so we're going to go back and have discussions with Metro General Services and Metro Public Properties around what we actually need. Included in the map were some residential buildings that we don't necessarily need. And so that will be an ongoing process as we sort of determine where those boundary lines will be based upon what we need and based upon what Metro government needs. And so that process will be ongoing. And now that the building is actually owned by Metro government, then we can request capital funding, much needed capital funding, to renovate spaces there, and as I said, also to expand to increase student enrollment. Anything else you want to add to that?
I'd just add that in year 2, there is an item for renovation of the Nashville School of the Arts, and that's a bit of a historic number where we were just tracking renovation of the building at our typical renovation costs. Now that we own the land, we'll be relooking at that number to include any additional space that we need, plus it appears that we'll be given several other buildings, including the old auditorium. And so if we're going to upgrade that building as well, then all of those factors will be brought into a new projected cost now that we have control of the property.
Thank you. I missed the purchase piece, so when did that occur?
I'm not sure, it's fairly recent, I'm not sure of the date. We were notified by Metro Public Properties.
And the three entities are STEM, Metro Government, and Metro Schools?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
I want to ask a general question, because, Michael mentioned, we've got this $1 billion capital backlog, and I want to ask why we have such an extreme backlog. I know, I've asked this before, and I know that we had 3 years where we received no capital funds, and that was due, I think you all said, was due to the economic downturn. But, I'm listening to all these sort of creative ideas and how we can fill in gaps, and, I think sometimes, and I would love to hear answers from you all, but we're just not setting this as a priority. I got 2 phone calls this morning from parents who said their children were cold at school. We've had mold problems in our schools, and I think we're doing the best we can, but the schools have to be the priority. And we've got this new convention center, we've got a new $80 million ballpark, and this bridge in the Gulch, and all these big things we're spending. And I think that's kind of, if we are not setting schools that are serving the most vulnerable, the neediest children as our top priority, I think that's a real travesty. And my understanding is that we've had, steady increases in our costs based on 3 factors, correct me if I'm wrong, but basically mostly on growth, on employee needs and benefits and pay, and on our charter growth. And I'm glad we're doing the audit. I think it's time to do it because there are a lot of lingering questions, where we're being asked if we're spending our money efficiently, and I think that's a question we have to address. But I think I'm just kind of tired as a board member of feeling like we are begging for crumbs at the table, because this really should be a greater priority for our city. I shouldn't have to call and say, the principals are telling the children to bundle up because our heating doesn't work, because I'm not talking to you all, but because the schools are old and they haven't been repaired, and we don't have money to fix everything, and we're just always patching. We patched at our school until we could finally put in a new roof. So anyway, can anybody tell me the history of why we're so behind?
I'll try to
Yeah.
address some of those, and I want to be sure to be clear. Since this current mayoral administration, there's only been 1 year when we didn't have capital funding. A number of years ago, there were 3 years where, and actually preceding me, where there was no capital funding. And so the backlog that currently exists has existed for a long, long time. It's got a long history. And some of that is because we do have a lot of buildings that are very old. The average age of our buildings is 43 years. We have had a number of instances over the years, and I'm going back historically, where we've not had much capital funding for things such as deferred maintenance. And so the buildings got old, the systems got old, et cetera, and as you said, we repair them the best we can, but they really need to be replaced. This past year was one of the first years where we were actually able to get some capital funding for some fairly substantial deferred maintenance. And we've got a lot of projects that are being designed, that are being planned, that I think will go a long way toward dealing with some of the things that we're currently having to deal with. But again, it's a large district with approximately 200 buildings and 14 million square feet. And when you have a lot of old buildings, particularly those that need a lot of repair, it's going to add up to a lot of dollars. We have been able to build new schools. We have been able to renovate schools, and we're very appreciative of that. But it still always seems like we're playing catch up, because the needs are so extensive, and they've existed for so long. And so it does require some consistent and hopefully predictable capital funding to be able to to deal with not only just the building condition, but a lot of what we've spent capital funding on in previous years, as you've just discussed, is capacity issues. We're trying to bring children out of portables by adding classrooms or building new schools, because we've had this student enrollment growth that we're glad to have, particularly in the southeast quadrant of the county. But that's where a lot of the capital funding has gone, is to provide classrooms to students. And when you have limited funding, that sometimes means that needed renovations just don't happen. And so you continue with what you have, and you make the best of it. So there's not an easy short answer. I guess the shorter answer would be that it's been long-standing and it's been historical, and it really would require an infusion of very significant capital funding over a period of time, as some school districts across the country have done, to a $500 million bond issue, for instance, to really, over a 5-year period, really bring schools up to par the way that they should function. And I think I looked a couple of years ago, when you look at the combined condition score, which is obviously the heavy driver in prioritizing either renovations or new schools, replacement schools. We calculated, just to bring all of our buildings up to a condition score of 80, had about a $500 million price tag to it. And so it would require, like I said, some substantial capital funding over a period of time to bring the buildings up to the condition we would all hope that they would be.
I wanted to just address a couple of your comments as well. And I've faced all of these in my day job. The cold question. I mean, the challenge is we're in an extremely cold weather pattern today, and our, the office buildings that I manage, we did not design those for 5-degree days. Right? There's only so much you can heat the air coming in without, or cool it, right? Without an extreme, without an extremely over-engineered system. So it's unfortunate that we're cold, but the cost to fix that problem would be tremendous. And then, when you look at, you mentioned the bridge, the convention center, the ballpark. If our mayor was here, and those are all things that I've had some ancillary involvement in. This mayoral administration and council, and this is a nuance I think that is really lost on many of our constituents that really aren't in the real estate business, right? Or really aren't in government finance. They have done a good job to look for alternative ways to fund those as well. So our convention center was fees and taxes generated by the visitors. It's not something that's on the general fund, so it didn't require a tax increase. The ballpark is being financed by private land acquisition and tax increment financing. Both of those, if you take the long view over 10, 20, 30 years, when those incentive packages burn off, they will begin to make, so there's no cost up front, and after the tax incentive burns off, those will begin to generate significant additional tax revenue that could then be used to service bond debt that we could offer in the future. But similar to strategic thinking that we're trying to engage in today for alternative funding sources, this mayor's tried to make investments in some pretty amazing projects to do the same sorts of things that we're talking about. But I feel like for a large swath of the community that maybe doesn't read the newspaper every day, that little nuance in how those are financed, you drive down the street and you're, wow, that's an amazing building. You don't think about the nuance behind how it was financed, and then Mr. Ensign hit I think a big nail on the head with just growth. We're adding 1,600 to 1,800 kids a year to the district and have for the last 4 years, and it's going to be as we think about. It's a problem, frankly, for Davidson County, right? I mean, we're projected to grow from roughly 1.8 million to 2.6 million in the next 17, 18 years. So we will see a significant amount of growth in the county. So it's why we have the transportation initiatives and land planning and density, and they're all discussions that are going to impact us that are, frankly, expensive and hard, hard to deal with.
Well, and with those things, though, you have to think about it, and I understand where you're coming from. You have to think about this. The more we become the it city, the more we grow, and the more families want to live here. The more families that move into our city, it increases the number of children that we have to educate. If you adequately educate the children in your city, it is going to continue to grow your economy. It's like this, it's a circle. If we don't educate our children, we don't grow the economy in our city, and our city doesn't continue to grow. The initiatives like the convention center, like the ballpark, like the bridge, those are all things that we use to attract more people to our city, more families to our city. And as we attract those families, we've got to be able to educate those children. If we don't have the proper or the adequate facilities to educate our children in, we're not going to continue to attract those families. So it's a never-ending cycle. And I agree with you, Amy, we need to start seriously looking at, and it's frustrating. It's been frustrating for me since I've been here. How is it that we can't seem to get the funding that we need for things that we consider and that our students and our parents and our teachers consider priority? We have buildings, like you said, Chris, average age 43 years. Some of our buildings, 43 years. And we're going to continue to have those issues. So what's the answer? Do we stop growing the city so that we don't attract families, so that we don't have to have an influx of children that we have to educate? Or do we put more money into somehow figure out how to fund our capital budget so that we can properly educate our children? Because if children learn better in better environments, when you go to school, and this great crazy weather aside, I mean, it hasn't been this cold in 20 years in Nashville, but crazy weather aside, when the conditions are conducive to learning, you learn more. You are more excited about your learning opportunities. But if I'm sitting in a classroom where the paint is chipping off the wall and the ceiling is about to fall in, I'm not really concentrating on what the lesson is, what the curriculum is being taught to me. I'm just trying to make sure that that tile doesn't fall on my head and create some issues down the road. So at some point, we've got to, while I understand that the financing for these projects may have been, done creatively, we still are attracting more people into our city. So how do we educate those families when they come to our city, if they walk into our schools and they're looking around like, what in the world is going on here? You can build a convention center, you can build a new ball field, but you can't take care of your schools. There's got to be, at some point, there's got to be closer attention, more attention paid to how we educate our children. And it's not just curriculum. It's not just getting the highest quality, most effective teachers. It does include the facilities that we're teaching them in. And I'll open it up to anybody else. I'll get off my, Ms. Froh, go ahead.
I just want to make it clear. I mean, those are all exciting things, and I'm not attacking those, and I'm not attacking any one certain person. I don't really know. I don't know how long this backlog exists, but I knew that it had been several years. But I just think, the infrastructure, that's not a sexy topic, but the infrastructure's got to be just as important as having these new and exciting projects. That's the only point I want to make. And I'm frustrated, and as I'm sure everyone else is, that we just are, we seem to always be behind, and the cold may not be a fair example, but I've got list of examples, respiratory problems from teachers because of water dripping and all these other issues that we've got to find a way to address. I'll plug for the evening.
And it's not sexy, huh?
Yeah, it's not sexy.
That infrastructure thing.
Not a sexy topic.
Any other questions from board members?
I'd like to make a comment, if I may. I want to commend, and this is, I'm not pushing back, but I want to make a comment about our maintenance department and our transportation department in this cold weather.
Absolutely.
We've had many school systems around us open 2 hours late because primarily of transportation. And we've had systems around us that have closed because of really cold buildings that you couldn't go in. And you might not know it, but our people work 24 hours a day during times like this. And I know that our transportation people, our bus drivers, have been going out to start their buses an hour early every day in these real cold days. And I got a report from customer service today that said that we actually had the fewest number of calls today about transportation than we've had in the last week and a half, 2 weeks. And so, and that ought to be a commendation to those people that are really putting forth the effort to go out and do that. And I know Thomas Hatfield and the maintenance people haven't heard about a frozen pipe. You know, I think we're probably running heat all night long to keep the buildings warm, and I know our bus drivers are going early, and I want to thank y'all for the work you're doing with that.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I know that bus drivers are getting up and getting out at 4:30 a.m. to start buses. And that is because they want to make sure that the children they're transporting are comfortable, are not freezing their tushies off when they get to school. I even had a bus driver stop me. Walmart is a favorite place for people to meet. Had a bus driver stop me in Walmart and say, here's the thing. I may get in trouble for this, so I'm not going to tell you my name, but if I see a student standing outside and their bus hasn't come yet and I've got some time, I'm going to stop and make sure that kid is warm and safe before I move on. And in this weather, I think it's absolutely fantastic. And so our transportation department is working overtime, and I think they're doing a fantastic job. So, Mr. Carr, please pass that along. And we thank them very much for everything they're doing. So, any other questions on capital budget? All right, Dr. Register, I'll turn it back over to you.
That concludes our report, our work session.
Fantastic. Thank you, everyone. We appreciate your time and being here. Have a good evening.
Let us all look forward to Thursday.
Absolutely.
I have a procedure for my face tomorrow. Oh! I've been trying to get it scheduled. He wants